So I'll start with this talk. It's titled Apply Empirical Conceptual Engineering. It's something that I've already somehow presented, but that's hopefully an ameliorated version of it. And this talk is a bit of special talk in a sense that it's the presentation of a project that I have been submitted for different fellowship schemes in terms of application, and that I will still use for an upcoming application. The reason I present it here again is not only because this winter has been insane with me, but because I would like very much to get some feedback, especially critical feedback from you on the different weaknesses that you may see in that project. So I'd be very grateful to you if you can help me with that. That being said, let's start with the talk. So the assumption here is that I take conceptual engineering to be about changing people's mind and the narratives that shape our world so as to make tangible differences in the face of the big issues of our times. So it has been mentioned yesterday, but you can think, for example, of the SDGs by the United Nations or these kind of things. The rationale is that conceptual engineering, at least I take it, still lacks of some sort of implementation strategy, if you wish, in the sense that we still do not really have an operational framework in order to really put it into practice effectively. And one of the purpose of the project itself is hopefully to kind of try to tackle that problem and eventually to fill that applied knowledge gap. So the whole goal of the project is, that's the goal, making conceptual engineering an effective tool to achieve real-world changes with measurable impacts. And it comprises two different objectives that I will spell out during the talk. It connects with the two successive parts of the talk. One is theoretical, the other applied. And something that I must say in introduction here is that I take conceptual engineering, I mean, that's not a claim for how it should be taken by everyone, but that's the way in which I intend to deal with it, as being, of course, a philosophical method, but not so much a method for philosophy. I mean, at least the way in which I'm interested in conceptual engineering for that project is to apply in the real outside world, not within the ivory tower, if you wish. So something that connects directly to that is that this project itself is somehow classified as being used inspired basic research, as they call it in their jargon, at least some of these agencies, which means that the project aims to produce scientific insights that will help resolve practical problems in collaboration with user practitioner communities with the potential to be implemented in the near future. So that's basically the idea, and that's really an important drive for the whole project. So the first part of the project is somehow the theoretical one, and it's the bit of the title that is called Empirical Conceptual Engineering. And it here the theoretical objective is the following, namely to devise the framework of conceptual engineering as a method for producing better concepts that are apt to be adopted by the relevant target user communities. And this general objective is made up of three successive interdisciplinary scientific aims. The first of these aims concerns the engineering process itself. Here, the goal or the aim is to obtain a widely applicable and highly flexible methodological model for engineering concepts, widely applicable in the sense that it may be applied to a wide range of diverse concepts, not only, for example, those of science, or not only social concepts, but different kinds of concepts, to speak in a kind of loose way, and while being appropriately calibrated with regard to the specifics of these different concepts. The question that is addressed here is then, how should we design the method of conceptual engineering and the strategy that I intend to, do not forget that it's a project, so it's something that is prospective. So what I intend to do is to, on the one hand, extract a common template out of the existing engineering design processes that you may find in the engineering sciences, or maybe just singling out one that is the most relevant to our purposes in conceptual engineering. And in a second step, to combine this common template with the framework they have in we have with Canopian explication as being made up of a set of weighted criteria for adequacy. So that's basically the idea. You may think that, for example, obviously the criteria that is kind of important to garner not fruitfulness but exactness as well may not be that relevant in the case of, say, certain kind of concepts, maybe social concepts, while simplicity would be kind of pretty central with regard to the aim of having it implemented and getting some uptake for the proposed regulation. So just kind of a tweak on the original version of Canopian explication. So the expected outcome is then to devise conceptual engineering as being made as of a stage process for engineering concepts, which would be then supplemented by a set of adjustable parameters for measuring conceptual amelioration. So I have some sort of prototype model that I call the DEDTI model, which stands for development, evaluation, design, test, and implementation. I can tell you a bit more about that in the Q&A if you wish. And the relevance of this outcome is to somehow alleviate the, to provide us with some partial control against the so-called anti-luminosity condition in which we are meant to all be, according to Herman Kaplan's view, somehow pessimistic view on our situation as conceptual engineer in the 2018 book. So the second bit of this theoretical part of the project concerns the target objects. Here, the aim is to obtain an operationalizable target objects for conceptual engineering. The question that would be addressed is then, what should conceptual engineering be operating on in order to achieve the desired changes, namely in people's minds and in terms of world-shaping narratives. And the strategy here has a rationale, but I cannot spell it out here, is to develop, on the one hand, psychological model of concepts. That is a model of concept that draws on the psychology of concepts and which puts at stake different extant model of concepts, such as environmentist, contextualist, and so on. And in a second step, to extend that psychological model with a linguistic model for how concept gets to be lexicalized, building on the work that has been done in so-called cognitive linguistics of the 70s, but to recently by Talmy in the earlier this millennium, and which they call construal operation or conceptualization processes. I'll tell you a bit more about this in a sec. So the expected outcome would be to get there by an empirically tractable target objects, or several empirically tractable target objects for the engineering process, supplemented by a set of linguistic operations for the appropriate lexicalization, that is for picking up the right lexical form, as they call it in lexicology, that is to be paired with the correct the relevant sense, if you wish. And that's something that's kind of important, because thereby what you get is a connection with what was at stake this morning with the presentation by Emilia in terms of tropes. I can tell you a bit more about that in the Q&A if you wish, but what you get with this linguistic operation is precisely the different models that have been developed under the name of the lake of framework, metaphor theory, mental models, and these kind of things, and they all draw on different kind of figure of speech, if you wish, that explain the way in which a concept may turn out to be lexicalized. And the thing that is kind of interesting, relevant in terms of relevance for the expected outcome, is that it is meant to ensure thereby some sort of strong impact for the method of conceptual engineering itself, because what you are reworking precisely the way in which people think about things, again, which goes against the trivialization of the activity of conceptual engineering that has been kind of singled out by Dodge in his recent papers. There are 2 of them, in fact, actually 21 as well, recently published. So the last bit of the theoretical objective concerns the empirical application, and here the aim is to obtain a well-suited empirical setting for creating better concepts. The question that is to be addressed just connects both the previous sub-project and is as follows: how should we apply the engineering process that we've seen in the first step to its target objects, concepts, and their lexicalization? And the strategies to do that will be that of adjusting the descriptive toolkit that we have, that they have in psychology of concepts and in cognitive semantics to the ameliorative, normative, evaluative purposes of conceptual engineering. A bit in a way in which it has been done by, for example, Mashri, when he uses the method of vignette that they use in X5 and makes it suited to his purposes of assessing or squaring the concept of innateness, the lay concept of innateness, with the scientific one, and trying to detect deficiencies in those. So the expected outcome here is to develop along James' lines the paper that is called fully experimental conceptual engineering. So to obtain a fully empirical framework for conceptual engineering that would be operating both at the individual level of conceptual cognition and at the collective level of linguistic practices. So as I said, that's kind of critical if you want to reach out to the narrative and the way in which they frame the world in which we are all embedded. And the expected relevance of that thing is to go against, or of it being fully experimental, is to go partly against the inscrutability, sorry, again, a bit hard to pronounce to me, and lack of control that we are supposed to, or the position in which we are supposed to be according, again, to Herman Kapellen in the book. So that was for the, sorry, the kids are at the background. So that was for the first bit of the talk, the first bit of the project. As said, the project is made of 2 kind of different parts that are meant to be run in parallel. So the second part is the practical one that goes with the title Applied Conceptual Engineering. And the goal, or the objective here, is to translate the new knowledge resources, that is the models and the methods that we developed in the first part of the project, into innovative product and processes, and make them suitable and available to social expectation. And that's really the bit in which the implementation aspect of conceptual engineering is to be tackled, if you wish. And that connects with the UIBR dimension of the project, so user-inspired basic research. And it's made of 2 interconnected strategies. Sorry. So the first of which is what I call, and what they call in the jargon, research valorization strategy. So here the aim is to make the methodological framework of conceptual engineering, that is methods and the models, suitable and available to social exploitation. The question to be addressed is, how can we make conceptual engineering implementable, that is effectively applicable to real-world issues? And the strategy here might be provocative, at least in the label, is to translate conceptual engineering on the model of what has been done for the business canvas model. I can tell you a bit more about that, supplemented by a set of pedagogic protocols, very much in the same spirit as what was mentioned this morning by James in his talk when he referred to gaming, I don't know, gaming apps, I guess, where you can just test the way in which you acquire some sort of new competencies, if you wish. So the expected outcome here is to develop and obtain a simplified template procedural framework for conceptual engineering that would expect to be easy to use, efficient, and that's important, understandable. And the impact is thereby to provide what will be, it will come in a sec, my target audience, namely think tankers, with a threefold tool: analytical, in order for them to better understand the policies or the way in which they have been formulated, and the dominant narratives in a given country or in a given sector. Strategic, in order for them to better challenge prevailing policies or narratives. And operational, again, in order for think tankers to improve the way in which they formulate their policy recommendations. So the second strategy is that is part of this applied aspect of conceptual engineering, is what they call research engagement strategy. And here the aim is to increase the usefulness, the suitability, and the uptake of conceptual engineering as it has been designed as a template framework in the target user and practitioner communities, namely think tanks. So the question here is, how can we test and improve the functionality of conceptual engineering as a simplified template procedural framework developed previously? And the strategy to do that, that's very important, and that connects directly with what has been said again by James this morning, is to, and as well, obviously with yesterday's talk by David, I guess, is to develop an inclusive participatory forum for knowledge co-creation via two-way transfers of practical and theoretical knowledge and expertise. So that's kind of very important. Something that I mentioned that is critical to the whole project is that obviously I won't be alone to do that. I'll be helped by, if it works, if the project gets funded at some point, by different people, different organizations, including obviously think tanks, and who are very specialized into setting up this kind of dialogue with people from different sectors. So here the approach is to build on a grassroots model with the case studies to be provided by the target user communities. It's not the philosopher or us or the academic team that comes with what interests the academic community, but it's bits on their input from the real world. And the case studies are meant to serve as entry points for in-depth, sustained engagement with the different stakeholders involved in that process of setting up this inclusive participatory forum for knowledge co-creation and so on. So the expected outcome is thereby to get the more and more implementability for the framework of conceptual engineering in order for it to eventually have some sort of likelihood to reach broader audiences. Here I spoke before in terms of social entrepreneurs, policy entrepreneurs, NGOs. But in light of what has been discussed this morning, especially by James again, I should include also like less high-level organization, but as well maybe community, more local entities, if you wish. And the way in which you can track the impact that you may have come to obtain for the framework is by tracking, monitoring, and recording observable behavioral changes in the target user and practitioner groups. You do that. There are plenty of frameworks. The one I intend to use for the project is called outcome mapping. You have another one that is called logic model. You could Google them. Logic model is by Kellogg's, the logician. And observable behavioral changes, I mean by that, the way in which the key concepts in the case study at stake have changed the operational, the analytic work of the target user and practitioner group. So there's one ethical issue that has been kind of put forward by many people each time I present that thing, is about the target communities, namely think tanks. The reason why they are picked up as being the relevant partner organization is that they are these organizations that provides evidence-based for policy making and thereby and also contribute thereby to the shaping of public debates. The way in which they will be selected is that they will be member of a global platform for think tank. It is called On Think Tank, which is one of the main partners for the project, which is based both in Lima, Peru, and London, UK. and most of which are from the global south. And with regard to the selection of the case studies, that's a kind of hand wavy here. And I know that's very problematic, especially in light of what has been pointed out yesterday by David in his talk. But the idea would be kind of just to have at least them aligned with the UN SDGs. Another reason why they've been picked up as their target audience think tanks is that it's very hard for philosophers, at least. You can tell me more, but that maybe you have some special skills that at least I do not have them to directly reach the policymakers. Whereas think tanks, think tank organizations, or NGOs and these kind of things are, especially think tanks, they are kind of like-minded. They kind of like abstract thinking. They are kind of very sensitive to this issue that also may concern some of us, and they have very powerful dissemination structures and skills in doing that effectively. So methodology, I'll speed up, but I'm done. That's nearly the end of the talk. So approach, framework, model. So the guiding principle is to have it as a UIBR, user-inspired basic research project that is both theory and practice based throughout at each step of the different work packages. The approach itself is kind of similar to what has been presented yesterday by David. It is interdisciplinary in the sense that it brings together philosophy, namely under the banner of conceptual engineering, psychology with the psychology of concept, linguistics in the case of cognitive semantics, and design engineering with regard to the models they have in the engineering sciences for that. And it is cross-sectoral in the sense that it connects academic research and community with the non-academic one. The framework I intend to use is the one that has been used in his PhD thesis by the guy who developed the business model canvas, which is the design science framework, which consists in applying theoretical knowledge to solve practical problems. So it's a kind of hybrid framework in the sense that it builds on a theory building approach that aims at understanding and explaining reality as they do in the sciences and sometimes maybe as well in philosophy, and with a problem solving approach that is much more common in design and engineering sciences, which is that of creating artifacts. So that's the framework, and you fill it with the different method we have in the human, social, and cognitive sciences. So conclusion, and that's done with it. So the major outcome is hopefully to, sorry, I have to move you, develop an effective tool for creating better concepts with measured impact on real issues that connects with the UIBR orientation of the whole project. On the basic research bit, the idea would be to develop an innovative methodological model that was the first part, operationalizable target objects, and to supply conceptual engineering with an empirical basis for its framework. And as regards the user-inspired bit of the project the goal or the expected outcome is to obtain some sort of implementable template procedural framework of conceptual engineering that is a functional product. And the core commitment that is kind of very critical with regard to the whole project is to have the whole multi-stakeholder research and innovation process aligned with the needs, the values, and the expectations of society, and that's the way in which it was handled with the slide that was titled Ethical Issues along the lines of the RRI framework. So that's basically it. Sorry for the interruption, and thanks so much to everyone.